I love that cut.
I do too.
One of my go-to cut. Now, Bill Evans has a cut called Peace, Peace. Are you hip to that?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, you gotta check it out.
I think I remember him playing Peace, but Peace, Peace?
Peace, Peace. Peace, Piece.
Oh,
Peace, Peace.
oh, cool.
It's one of his. It's a bad cut.
Cool. Ba-da-da-da. I love the solos on this too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, I am almost there. Hold on one second. I don't hear you, Eddie, by the way.
Oh, I didn't say anything yet. Can you
Oh,
hear me now?
okay. Sorry.
Peace, Peace. Peace, Peace. Peace.
I see. I was late, earlier rather. Okay, I'm going to bring the music down,
Okay.
although this is a good solo.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, there we go. All right. Here we go. Let's see. Off and ladies and gentlemen, hi. Good morning. I am going live here with my 558th guest, Mr. Eddie Becton, who I've known for a long time, but we've kind of gone in and out of seeing each other and being in communication. But glad you're back in communication with me.
It's good to be back. I was in
Yeah.
St. Louis for a number of years, so it's good to be back in LA.
You just never you just never know.
Right. That's how the universe works.
It does. Hi Joyce, and Donna Suhey is here, and
Hey Donna. How about
Kino
you, Donna?
Red.
Kino. All right. Oh, okay.
So, okay, Eddie Becton.
Yes.
Where do I begin? Well, first of all, okay, this is a very casual conversation, and
Hmm.
I don't like to read up too much on my guests because it
Right.
kind of interrupts my casual conversation.
Yeah.
First of all, you're such a huge jazz fan, so let's just start there. Um, how did you fall in love with jazz, and how did that kind of come to fruition in your life?
It goes back 50 something years. And I mean that. So this is how it started. when I was a kid, 5, 6, 7 years old, both my parents really enjoyed music. My father had a broad taste, right? In fact, one of his favorite groups was a group called Traffic, Low Spark at High Heel Boys, one of his favorite cuts. So he would do, rock, jazz, funk, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
My mother, though, was the what I call the straight ahead jazz fan.
Uh-huh.
And so sometimes I would just sit in front of the stereo. And this is to let you may be too young for this, but they were called Curtis Mathis. And those are those big stereo sets. It was like a big giant piece of furniture. It was a
Yeah.
stereo console. And you lift
Right.
the top and the turntable is inside. That's how old it is.
I remember those. I didn't remember the name, but yeah, I
So I
remember.
would sit in front of the stereo and just rock back and forth, just like this, to, Chico Hamilton, Wes Montgomery, Billie Holiday, all those classics. So that's how it started. I was a kid and the music always resonated with me. So I was able to get from my mother that straight ahead classic jazz. And my father, my ear developed for other types of music. So by the time I went off to college, I had stereo equipment. So my room was one of those places that a lot of people would come in and hear all these because they'd be walking by the door, and they'd hear all types of music, right? You might hear some Rolling Stones, but you also were going to get a heavy dose of Wes Montgomery or John Coltrane, or any number of jazz musicians, and that's how it started.
You're bringing back my own memories, like because I grew up, I had twin sisters 4 years older than me, and
Okay.
um, and my dad was a sax player, and my mom used
Ah,
to sing. So I grew up listening to Ella Fitzgerald, and
mhm.
but in that period of time, you know, kind of old R&B was coming in strong,
Right.
and Motown and Woodstock, and so and by the time I got to college, I went to Berkeley for flute, but
Mm,
by the time I got there, Woodstock had already happened, and
yeah.
Motown was strong, and it was Boston. There was blues and Motown, but then you know, Miles and Weather Report and,
Yeah.
all kinds of jazz. And I remember also thinking about uh, choosing a direction to sing in
Hmm.
Woodstock stuff, which I really loved, or
Hmm.
jazz. And I
Hmm.
really remember that moment of time, I'm going to choose jazz. But of course, I mean, we have so much amazing music. I mean,
Hmm.
it's really an embarrassment of riches, what we grew up with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Incredible music. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned, and neither one of us, you or I, we don't know how this conversation is going to go, right?
Yeah.
And I like the that's the foundation of jazz, improvisation, right? So I'm glad that you didn't send me like a list of questions, and we're just letting it happen organically, which I think that adds to the discussion. That being said, you just said something that struck a chord with me. You talk about Woodstock, and in one of my classes yesterday, I was talking about two very important labels, and not exclusively, but their impact on society during the 1960s. Stax out of Memphis, and of
Yep.
course, Motown out of Detroit.
Right.
Contextually, we were talking about, of course, the artist, but the relationship of the music those two labels produced to society. So I was trying to get the point across how music is intricately related to what's going on in society and vice versa, right? So that Motown, when they first started out, love you, the love songs, the courting songs, oh baby, I need you, those types of things. But socially, right in the latter part of the 60s, early 70s, we began to see Motown start talking about kind of some what we might politically themed messages. As I understand it,
Marvin
uh,
Gaye, right?
as I understand it, Berry Gordy was not exactly
Yeah.
receptive to singing about politics at that
Right.
time, right?
Right.
Berry Gordy, what did he say? I want to create music that everybody can listen to, not just Black kids, not just
Yeah.
white, that everybody.
Yeah.
Right. So he was very astute as a businessman because he understood the politics, if you will, of the country. But nevertheless, when Marvin Gaye saying what's going on, I think Barry Gordy, he probably had a second thought
He
because
did.
that song, I think, went immediately to #1, something insane like that,
Yeah.
right away.
Yep.
Right. But going back to my point, which I was trying to explain to the students, never underestimate the power of music as a political social medium, and that it's more than just simply a collage of sounds, right?
Right.
So when
Right.
you talk about Woodstock, it really stuck with me because I started immediately, I'm thinking about the politics of the climate during that time, right?
Yeah, that was such a heavy moment, right?
Oh
And
yeah,
uh, I was a little too young to go to Woodstock, but right
yeah,
before Woodstock were things like Tin Soldiers and Nixon coming, da
yeah,
da da da, right? There were, and my school was, I mean, everybody was out of class, you know.
yeah, yeah.
We were 16 and 17, and
Right, right.
everybody was out of class. And yeah, the music touched on the kind of frustration and that especially the younger people were feeling, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And yeah, and the fact that we could all be together,
Mm-hmm.
could all
Mm-hmm.
be humanity together. I think that was a huge inspiration too. What else do you think was inspirations, in that way,
I mean, for me,
or for everybody?
well, let me go back because you mentioned a very important song. That song is called Ohio,
Yeah,
right? And it's by Crosby. It was by Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
yeah.
Who, you talk about improvisation? That was not a song that they actually had planned.
Oh,
That song came out of the National Guard killing students at Kent
right.
State University, right? And then also it came out of the energy of students who were killed at Jackson State. So politically, that's what you had this contentious relationship with America, U.S. government, and policymakers with young people. And I'm always instilling and telling students when we look at social movements around the globe, many of them have come from young people. Why? Young people tend not to worry about things like, well, I'm not going to go out here and protest because I got to pay this mortgage,
Yeah,
right? I got to pay this child care. All right. So older people, old heads like me, we comfortable, right? Too many of us are worried about the consequences. But young people, you
I'm
look at
right here. I'm just turning
the,
on my fan. Go ahead.
okay, but you look at the social movements around the world. Often the thrusters come from young people,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
But that song is that's one of the seminal songs. You had Creedence Clearwater Revival, right? Was it I'm not the fortunate son,
Yeah.
right? And they're talking about the challenging America
Yeah.
to be what it said it was. The irony is that those same young people who simply wanted to America to be what it was, they didn't hate America. They loved America just like everybody else.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
just wanted America to stop, let's be honest. In fact, Oscar Brown has a beautiful song. They just want America to stop bullshit,
Yeah.
right? And that's all. But they were labeled as, malcontents,
Yep.
right? And that's again, that goes back to my point about the importance of music as I call it a tool of transformation, the potential of social transformation, right?
Yeah. You're making me think of it's not too many years. I mean, but it was a chunk between the McCarthy era and that.
Oh yeah,
I mean, that whole period, talk about social change. Whoa. Right?
to say the least.
Yeah.
And when you talk again, that's I love the organic nature of the conversation. I had no idea you were going to talk about McCarthy. What that made me think about was Paul Robeson, right?
Uh-huh.
With the HUAC committee, the House Un-American Activities Commission. I mean, come on, right? So the notion that we see these things play themselves out today. Who is more American, right? So it's the other. You're not American. Like, I'm more American because that is just the noise. But if we don't understand HUAC and its
Yeah.
relationship to artists during that time, what we hear today may sound confusing or new.
Yeah.
So when you talk about McCarthyism, they had a whole list of musicians, artisans, and so forth who were labeled as communists, right? That goes the boogeyman, right? So that's the interesting thing about America. It's a proclivity to choose an other at any given point in history, right? So in the case of Paul Robeson, here's a man who was the penultimate Renaissance man,
Yeah.
scholar, right?
Yeah.
A trained lawyer. He did theater. He did movies. He did everything. And not just did everything, but he did it exceedingly well. And he traveled because of his craft and his knowledge. He traveled around the world and was invited to places around the world, Russia being one of those places, among others, right? So he was labeled as un-American. And in part because he challenged America to be what it said it was, right? Displayed freedom, justice, and liberty for all. So when Paul Robeson would talk about the injustices that Black people were experiencing in America, so when he's singing and dancing, that's cool. But when he starts talking about injustice, policymakers like, hold on, player,
Yeah.
I'm out.
Yeah.
And they took his passport, which of course was his livelihood. He travels around the globe, which also is, that's another discussion right there. This Black man traveling around the globe at that period of time, right?
Yeah.
But again, you struck a chord when you said that, McCarthy, because it resonated. It made me think about the application of McCarthyism back then to the rhetoric and discourse we hear today. It's a continuation in
Yeah.
many ways.
Doing this show, I've said this a number of times on the show, but doing this show, kind of gave me a duh moment, which was like, artists, first of all, there's so much art on the planet.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
so much art. I mean, it's overwhelming. It's just tons of great art. And then just the idea that we actually balance the planet out, because without art, you're just a black dot in space,
Right. It is like, my firm belief is it is our artisans in all the forms they come in,
Yeah.
whom, first of all, that we should actually elevate more than we do as a society, and I mean that not only in America, I mean as a globe.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes I think it's really interesting. Sometimes I think other countries kind of get it more than we do in America in
Yep.
terms of the respect for art
Yep.
as a treasure. Because I think it's our artisans who are the ones who are telling our stories,
Yeah.
right? They are connecting the contemporary generation with generations past.
Yeah.
And that's the power of, what the Egyptians called the nomo, the power of the word. It's those artisans. And that's what I love. On a side note, in terms of historically, one of my favorite areas to talk about, discuss, think about, etc., is the 60s.
Yeah.
I think that area was just so fertile. There was so much going on, obviously a lot of turmoil. But in terms of the music, I love the music. That's one of my favorite eras in
Me.
terms of music, like across the board,
Yeah.
right? And even this, a lot of times people forget, even jazz musicians were proactive, right? During these protest periods, so-called protest movements. You had, who's it, Wes Montgomery, right? He had Air Region, right? His name was, so he was talking about making a reference to the independence movement of Nigeria. So Air Region is Nigeria spelled backwards. You had Lee Morgan, who had a song called Kenyatta in reference to Yomo Kenyatta, right? So you had these jazz musicians who, John Coltrane, his song Alabama. So talking about the injustices in Alabama, right? We certainly had the bombing, 16th Street bombing, 16th Street Baptist Church, 1963. where these Klan members bombed a church that killed 4 little girls. It injured, well, one, I can't remember her name, but there was a 5th girl who actually survived that bombing, right? So you had these, even the jazz community was in tune. So I think sometimes people forget that jazz musicians, again, music is reflective of society and vice versa, right? But don't sleep on the jazz musicians. They knew what's going on too.
Why do you this is a very vague question, really without an answer, but well, I'm going to ask it anyway. Why do you think I mean, okay, just coming off from what you said,
Mhm,
so all kinds of artists get it. Art connects you to God. It connects you to a feeling of betterment and,
mhm,
inner joy, which is God.
mhm,
Why,
mhm,
why do other people, and we know it's the smaller percentage, but
mhm,
still,
mhm,
why do other people seem to not know that? You know, they don't get it. They're interested in, it's like they should be on another planet or something, and be involved in only, politics, not the real politics, but
mhm, mhm.
politics and, you know, no art and, no, they don't support that. Why? I mean, any ideas, any thinking on that? I
Certainly,
think about that.
that's a
That
multi-tiered.
bothers me.
That's certainly a multi-tiered question. I think one reason, certainly there are more, but I think at least one is what art consists of, meaning the potential that art has. So I think one level on one, the resistance of embracing and elevating our artisans is because our artisans tell the truth, right? It's like I tell you, the song by Oscar Brown, one of the baddest artisans on the planet. He has a song called Bullshit, and he's talking about how it's our, in part, our artisans are not afraid to tell the truth.
Hmm.
And if we just look at America alone. We don't have to go to the globe. We can do it, we can do it by state. Oftentimes, America does not want to hear the truth. We can go back to the point that we just mentioned
Yeah.
about Kent State and Jackson State. Can you imagine the National Guard killing U.S. citizens because they were protesting a war on Vietnam and so forth? So I think America is not always ready to hear what it really needs to hear. So that's one reason, that's one answer, I think, why our artists are not because they're not good or they don't know what they're talking about, is because of what they represent, in my opinion. And what they represent is the unadulterated truth. Because that's artisans are speaking from their lens, from the worldview. This is what I see, either through my sculpture or through my painting or through my words. However, whatever medium they use, they are describing what they see, right? We can look at Gil Scott-Heron, one of the baddest artists, in my opinion, the cosmos have ever produced,
Yeah.
unadulterated,
Uh-huh.
right? So that's my kind of simple response, at least for one area, why I think our artists are not elevated to the extent. And it's about priorities too, right? Think about how what we prioritize in America and what we don't. Art programs all around the country are being eliminated. How insane is that? Now that part I don't get. On one level, I don't get. On another level, I do get it. In fact, on another level, it makes complete sense
On the
because
level that the
when you think about what artisans do, the griots of society, for lack of a better description, it makes sense. If we live in a suppressive or oppressive society that attempts to mute the voices of the intelligentsia or those who are trying to make a change, it makes complete sense to me
well,
why
I
it would
I
be.
think I think those small percentage of people are doing just that, and they're doing it through hypnotism almost, It's like create create this and call it the truth, like so many of these, of the past political
Mhm,
events that have happened. Let's create this truth and then
mhm,
sell it, you know.
mhm,
And
mhm,
and over here is the real truth, and somehow that marketing and selling isn't as strong as this, or it's
mhm.
not as connected into people. It's just yeah, it's something to get really pissed off at.
You get pissed off, or you can get energized, like I do. One of the ways I maintain a certain level of sanity um, is being around young people.
Uh-huh.
That helps me. It helps me because I'm always energized at hearing the young ideas, right? So I always tell my students, y'all keep me fresh. And the other part that I love being around young people, and I alluded to this earlier, is just that it's a certain level of idealism, and it borderlines being naive. But the part of thinking about and teasing out possibilities, that is what helps keep me fresh,
Yeah.
in spite of the forces that attempt to mute those wonderful voices and those, fertile minds. That's how I keep, and of course my jazz,
Yeah, yeah.
and my music in general, but my jazz in particular. That's what keeps me going, and passing on that tradition.
Yeah, me too. In fact, I always say that the state of mankind right now, there's three choices that the future holds. One, we're going to blow up. Two, aliens are going to come save us. Three, the young people are going to create new and wonderful things and ways to live and get better. I'd like to
Mhm.
I'd like to focus on that one, although the
Right, right.
aliens.
I think it's probably of the three. Of the three, I lean toward the last one
I have a few questions from
because I'm not sure aliens will want to even come here.
if they're not here already. Okay,
Right, exactly. Go ahead.
let's see. I have a few good questions from my friend Taylor. He's a very thoughtful,
Mhm.
good question maker. How often do you think about what artistry means in a world that's so economically driven? To me, so focused on products for money can be daunting sometimes. Do you think the economy is sucking up our own creativity?
Let me go back to the first part of the question. How often, it's not hyperbole. How often do I think about it? All the time. In fact, it's a part of my existence that drives who I am
Yeah.
and what I do.
Hmm.
Meaning that's how important art is, artistic production, creative production is to the very fabric of my soul.
Yeah.
So it's not a profession. It's not something I do because I think it's cool and I'm trying to get a whole bunch of likes on TikTok. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm talking about what sustains my very being. Right. And so the other part was they were asking if art is the economics. What was that question?
Do you think the economy is sucking up our own creativity?
The economy is not necessarily, in a sense that I think people who are committed to art, they're going to do it. I mean, think about the term starving artists. They're starving. Many of them are starving because they are so committed to their craft that they're not worried about the economics. Right.
Yeah.
So so I don't think that I'm not, I'm optimistic, and in some ways cautiously optimistic, but we're always going to have those artists. Now, I'm not naive either. Of course, you're going to have some who are going to get paid big bucks to mute those thinking, those critical voices.
Yeah.
Yeah, economics, of course. The economics are going to economics affect everything we do in a society, right? We
Right.
live in a capitalistic society, so it's given that economics are embedded in the very fabric of everything we do: politics, education, healthcare, you name
Yeah.
it, right? And that includes art. But again, I think that the artists are going to. I'm optimistic But by the same token, again, I recognize that economics will undoubtedly affect the artist community. I mean, that's a given. So, but I just, I'm naive. I'm hopeful.
Well, look at the period of time in the pandemic. Yeah, so first everybody
Right.
was crushed, and actually I'm still pissed off about that, but that particular point. But artists, even though they were squashed for a minute, they bounced back. They got more creative, it seemed to me.
Exactly. They found ways to continue to hone their craft. So I know musicians, I know you do as well, who initially, I think the pandemic, it caught everybody off guard.
Yeah.
Everybody was like, whoa, what am I gonna do? This is new, right? I think part of the beauty, and that's what I call it, part of the beauty of the pandemic is that it forced us in many ways to slow down
Yep.
and to actually think. It's like George Clinton said, one of his most famous tunes, think, it ain't illegal yet, right? So I think that pandemic forced us to slow down a bit to, in some ways, kind of reinvent ourselves.
Yeah.
And so and again, musicians, I know musicians who initially are like, wow, all my gigs, I can't go to the club and play my gigs. Wait a minute, I can have a live broadcast in my home now. And I can put a link on it and say, yeah, if you want to make some donation. So that's what some of the artists, that's how they, what's one of the cool words, one of the words of the day, the flavors of the day, pivot, right? I get a kick out of that word. So people pivoted, right? So these artists are like re-pivoted, but it didn't stop them.
Right.
So the pandemic was a disruption. But I think there's, of course, there's, a tragedy on so many levels. But
Yeah.
I think there was some good that came out of it. One being forcing people to slow down and think.
Yeah.
And 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 this is what I really loved about the residual impact, the unintended outcomes of the pandemic. And that is it forced people to say, you know what? I hate this job that I'm going to 9 to 5 every day. When I wake up every morning, I'm like, damn, I gotta go here. And that when those types of jobs were shut down, and people were hating the very idea, even though they were getting paid, it forced them to say, you know what, I'm gonna finally do something that I've always wanted to do.
Yeah.
So you saw this increase in people starting their own businesses, whether it was, I know one of my friends, she like all these what do they call it, soap
Yeah.
with different fragrances, had always wanted to do that. So I think that's one of the positive unintended outcomes of the pandemic. It forced people to repivot, right?
Yeah.
Where they began to pursue their own dream and stop thinking about, working for this company for 20, 30 years and you get this gold watch and you get this crappy
Yeah.
retirement party. And it forced them to say, you know what? I want to start living now.
Yeah.
That was a beautiful part of it.
It was. Kind of connected to that. Again, my friend Taylor, who asked the last question,
Mhm.
he has a simple question now, Taylor, because he had a bunch of ones that you have to think about. But actually, I think this goes along with what we're talking about right now. Why do you think some humans are so fixated on perfectionism when it comes to showcasing themselves?
Hmm. I'm not sure. I know I would have to think about that because I'm not so sure that people are actually fixated on perfectionism. I think I'm not sure. I'm not sure I get that yet.
I
People are
mean,
fixated.
I can relate to it in a
Mhm.
shorter term thing, like teaching people how to sing, or
Mhm.
going to see people sing, or singing myself. It
Right.
seems to be a continual refocusing that I have to do to
Mhm.
be in the moment, enjoying the musicians,
Right.
communicating the music,
Mhm.
and not caring about being perfect, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So I can relate to that question there, and
Mhm.
I've talked to enough people who do seem like if they have, let's say, emotional discomfort in their
Mhm.
own lives, a
Mhm.
lot of times it's about perfectionism. You know,
Mm.
they're not
Mhm.
perfect enough. Their mother said they should be more perfect, or,
Mhm.
they've carried that idea that they can't be if they have to be polite, or they can't be too outside of the norm, or,
Mm.
that kind of thing.
Okay. Okay.
So I can right there.
Right. Right.
Let's see another Taylor question.
Tell. I'm gonna have to have a separate Zoom.
He'd
I'm
be
cool with it.
happy.
Go
He
ahead.
would be happy about it. Philosophically, what aspects about life in music has been giving you the most curiosity? Can you pinpoint something recently that has been influencing your listening?
Wait. Say philosophically. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, it seems like two questions. Philosophically, what aspects about life in music has been giving you the most curiosity?
Okay. Um. You know what? It's interesting. This what I consider to be an overused, underappreciated, and certainly uh, uh, underutilized term, and that is this word, that's term called peace. It's ironic we were talking about Bill Evans earlier, peace, peace.
Yeah,
So I'm talking
yeah.
about the PEACE. We
Okay.
just throw that word out. The world wants peace, and and I get it contextually,
Yeah.
but philosophically, that drives me. Now, let me explain what I mean.
Okay.
And my disdain in terms of how it's so, at least as far as I'm concerned, tritely thrown out.
Okay.
We talk ad nauseum about peace, but our actions, unfortunately, too often belie the fact that what we're doing is not working towards peace.
Right.
And I go back to a beautiful phrase or line in a Gil Scott Heron song. Absolutely beautiful. And he says, the direct quote, he says, peace is the absence of the threat of war. Right? Oh no, he said peace is not. He said peace is not only the absence of the threat of war; it's the absence of all these notions, the fear of war. So the final part that he says we'll never have peace because you can't make no money from it. And that's like a proverbial kidney punch.
Uh-huh. Right.
Peace is the absence of war, but also the absence of the threat of war. But when I say I think it's overused, we throw out this term peace, we talk about wanting peace, but in the next sentence, we're sending people uh, uh, um, uh, uh, bombs, tanks. So how do you make peace using bombs and tanks? That's the part. So it's like I'm gonna beat you, I'm gonna overwhelm you, I'm gonna out militarize you until you are peaceful. That does not that confuses the hell out of me. I don't understand that.
Yeah.
We talk peace, but I don't think we really want peace in general. Like at least those who are in position to make peace happen more swiftly than others.
Yeah.
I think regular people, like people, like, working class people, people on the lower end. Yeah, I think a lot of people want peace. We want not only the absence of war, but the absence of the threat of war. But I think too many of those who have those decisions where they can aid in that process, they realize we can make too much money from the absence of peace. We can make too much money from war. I mean, think on one level, think about it like this. Think about how the economy would crumble if all the mechanisms and entities that we have that are related to military or war, if somehow they were dissipated. right? They disappeared.
Yeah.
That would have a tremendous impact on our economy. Well, that means, what about all the military bases that the United States, just the United States alone, that we have around the world? That means that those soldiers, now they got to come home. If they were not involved, then where are they going to work? How much? So there's so many levels. So I understand how war is very, very financially productive. But going back to the question, that notion of peace drives me philosophically, because I want to get to that space of peace and teaching young people what peace is, the absence of war, but also the absence of the threat of war. So that's my take on when the question of what philosophically drives me, and as it relates to my music. So I surround myself with music and artists who feed me like that. Errol Sanders, John Coltrane, Dwight Tribble, right? Carmen Lundy. The list goes on. That's like several Zoom calls. So there's so many artists, local, national, and international, who feed me musically. They feed me peace through their art. All right. And what was the second part? Was that was the first part, the philosophical part?
Let's see. And there is a question from somebody else, Donna.
Okay.
Let's see. Where am I? Um, can you pinpoint something recent that has been influencing your listening?
Actually, no. And here's why. In general, no. Because music is always in my head, even when I'm not sitting down listening to music. One of my colleagues, it's kind of funny. One of my colleagues, she said to me, I guess we were walking across campus, and she stopped me. She said, "Eddie Becton." She kind of like hissed, "Eddie Becton, every time I see you, you're just bouncing, and what's going on?" And I said, the reason that I'm bouncing, I've got this pep in my step is, I said, music is always in my head. Right? And she like, I knew it. I knew it. You just always bounce. You know what I'm saying? But there's no particular event that it has inspired my musical listening in any type of way, in part because I just listen to a whole range of type of music. So let's say with politically what's going on in the world right now, that hasn't inspired me any way to listen to any particular form of music more than other, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the answer is no,
Yeah.
not necessarily. Yeah.
You made me think of, um, don't ask me why I went to this, but this week, the music that I'm involved with, going out to see or supporting. So to, tonight I'm having a jam session at Kulak's
Okay.
Woodshed, and then tomorrow night, a singer from a little
Mhm.
bit out of town, Rose Mallet, who's a great.
I know Rose down the riverside. Yeah.
Yeah, she's a
Mhm.
great singer. She's singing at Kulak's tomorrow
Mhm.
night. Then the next night, great pianist Uziel Colon, who
Mhm.
teaches, he might teach at USC or somewhere like that. Anyway, real burning band. So Friday. And then Saturday and Sunday, the Angel City Jazz Festival is performing. And
Mhm.
Sunday, I'm going to volunteer at the Red Cat. One of the bands has Benny Maupin in it.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of, wow. I mean, that whole, right there, there's like four different, really different musical experiences that are happening.
Absolutely. And that for me, that's the heart. Like, I moved back to LA in August. And even before I left, what I'm about to say applied then and still does. The hardest part for me about living in LA, I mean, really, the hardest part, this lets you know how beautiful life is, right? The hardest, one of the hard nights, so I don't have to deal with traffic a lot. The hardest part is the choices are so broad.
Yeah.
And so the hardest part is, what am I going to miss? Right?
Right,
Because
right.
there's so much art, right?
Yeah.
LA is such a vibrant place that I want to go to the Angel City Jazz Festival, but I might miss something else.
Yeah.
Right now, if we were in New York, it might be a little different because things are so concentrated.
Yeah.
In LA, things are spread out. So by the time I go from Red Cat to somewhere else, I'm in traffic longer than it's going to take the performance.
And you might miss it anyway because you're traveling.
Exactly. So that's the hard part about being in LA. There's so much going on in just the art world alone, the music world,
Yeah.
that I oftentimes have to sacrifice something.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, you mentioned some excellent performances, and when I was thinking earlier yesterday, how am I going to get to all this stuff? Right, that's coming up. Right,
Right.
I know Rocco, right, the organizer of the Angel City Jazz. A lot of these cats I know, and have worked with and helped in myriad ways, and vice versa. But that's the hard part about being in LA musically. What am I going to miss?
I agree, man. I agree. I mean, especially before the pandemic, I was going out 5 nights a week just
Yeah,
because there was just so much great music. And,
yep, yep, yep.
I'd say some of the people don't really get how much greater it is to sit live in an audience.
Oh,
No
absolutely,
matter how you're feeling, you could be
without a doubt.
dead tired and then you show up and it's like you know all your cells in your body and your mind are like
Hmm. Hmm.
you know
When I teach, it's interesting. When I teach my jazz history class, one of the requirements is, well, I show them how to write a review of a concert and all that type of thing. But one of the requirements is to actually go to a live jazz performance and then write a review out of that. Because I'll give you an example. I'll show them an artist, um, so yeah, we talk about different kind of flavors, textures of jazz. And one of the songs that usually gets the most discussion is a cut by Kool and Gang called Summer Madness, right? So when I'm discussing like interaction, right, call and response patterns, that type of thing, I start out by playing Kool and the Gang just on the CD itself. Summer Madness, just the CD itself. And then I'll play on CD the live version of Summer Madness. Same song, but now the live version. And then I'll play a video clip of Summer Madness where they can actually see musicians. It's a completely different experience. Now, even though they've seen and heard them, then, in terms of the class requirement, actually have them go out and come out and write about their response.
oh,
What's fascinating about this song is when you see them performing live, all those terms that we've talked about in class, syncopation, interaction, call and response, now you see it in action. And it's so beautiful because, in particular, the bass drummer with the live version, the video clip, you see the bass player and the synthesizer player, they start off, right? And they're a few feet from each other. And we talk about these terms, what does in the pocket mean? And as the song goes along, they are all up on each other and playing off of each other, talking about the interaction. And it's so much fun. But going back to the point, and really supporting your point, there is nothing like that live experience. It's like traveling. I can look, I can look in the magazine and see these exotic places around the world. That's completely different. Which is that's a commercial, if you will. Always encouraging my students to travel as much as you possibly can, and preferably out of the country. There's nothing more rewarding than traveling out of the country. It presents an entirely different lens on so many levels,
yeah.
you know.
I
So,
have a question from Donna.
hello, Donna.
She said, what's the biggest takeaway you want your students to remember, hopefully impact their lives from jazz?
Wow. Well, Donna, I appreciate that question. I love that question. You know what? It may sound simple, but it's something that I say all the time. And that is the biggest takeaway that I actually put it on them. And that is all it takes is one person to make a difference in the world. It may sound silly, it may sound trite, but encouraging students, all it takes is one person to make a difference. So I use music, specifically, I use music oftentimes as a metaphor. This is, responding to Don's question. Oftentimes I use music as a metaphor for life. I'll give you a prime example. One time we had, it was this program on campus, and it was these were students who had been accepted to LMU, and school had not started yet. So their parents are here and they're all excited. And so they had the panel of faculty members, people from different departments. And, I'm so-and-so, so-and-so, I'm from this department. I'm like, how boring, first of all. So everybody knows I'm animated and I'm, to some, unconventional. So I said, well, I'm doing the jazz history course and other things like that. I said, I'm not going to say like, I'm Professor EDDIE BECTON, I teach jazz history and we talk about John Coltrane. Get out of here. I wouldn't want me to leave if I were in the audience, right? So I told him, I said, look, go on, Donna, this is in context of your question. I use jazz as a metaphor for life. So remember, so these are the students, but also their parents. So these are people in their 50s and 60s. So it's a reference that I knew they could relate to. And I said, they introduced me. I said, how many of the parents here have heard of a song by Herbie Hancock called Chameleon? Boom, boom, boom. And like, oh yeah. I'm right there. I got them. It's like fishing. When you fish, you go up, you hook them, and then you reel them in. So, boom, boom. That's all I had to commit. Now, oh yeah, we got yeah. So now they're paying attention right off the bat. Had I got up there, I'm Professor so-and-so, and I'm a big jazz fan, I would have kicked myself out the room. You know what I'm saying? So I said, I use jazz. First of all, I thank you all for entrusting us with your children. But I use jazz as a metaphor to help train your children for life. Yes, I want them to know and teach them everything I possibly can. But if I'm not preparing them for life, I'm being, in my eyes, irresponsible and frankly, useless. So they're like, whoa. So I said, let's play this out. I said, since y'all heard of Chameleon, I said, I want somebody office in the room. Just start off with that kind of bass line. Boom, 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 boom. And everybody kind of laughed. So like one parent, boom, 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 boom. And then I said, for another parent, I want you to do the drum line. So now that parent jumps in. So now we got boom, 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 right? And then I said, for somebody, so one of the students said, give me that sax, I said, just follow. I said, da-na, 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 da-na. So now they get in, right? And then I guess, so then I got somebody making the percussion sound. And, everybody's laughing, but guess what? They're all doing it in unison, and they're doing it in a way that, wait a minute, they're a musician, but just doing it from their bodies and their voices, it sounds congruent. It sounds good. And then they sat down and I asked them, what just happened? Well, we were, kind of modeling this off. I said, but on a deeper structure level, what just happened? I said, what we did when you start off with boom, 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 boom. I said, that was cool, wasn't it? But what happens when the drum comes in? I said, we're using jazz as metaphor. If that individual just playing the bass, that sounds cool, but the life experience, the sound, metaphor for life, the life experience, our lives are more full, I argue, when others are a part of that space. So as an individual, I can navigate with that bass line alone, boom, boom, right? But my life experience is more full when other people are coming in and contributing to the collective. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I just confused the hell out of Donna. But
I
I
don't think
use jazz,
so.
right, I use jazz as a metaphor for life.
I
I
want
love her question.
I want to share a few things with you, which I'll share later too. But
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
so I made these up, and they're different sayings, but this was one. All it
Yeah.
takes is one
Yeah.
here.
Think about
And
social movements
and then
around the world.
book
One person.
book of
Absolutely.
metaphors.
Right.
I'm going to send this to you because this was metaphors relating to jazz, learning voice technique, and life.
Wow. Okay.
So
Okay.
the three things, together,
Yeah.
actually.
And so, yeah, you get it. You
Yeah,
understand the power. And
yeah,
but again, and look at social movements around the world. Often they just start with this collective group of people. It started most times with one person, and then others learned about those respective platforms and decided to join in. But I think one of the problems with education, as I see it, now we're talking my politics. One of the problems, and I've taught at every level, the only level I've not taught at and was never interested in was high school.
uh-huh.
I just didn't want to do high school. I've done every level but high school
Huh.
in different parts of the country. Small universities, big universities, small, maybe, 4 or 5, up to 30, 40, private, Catholic, community college, elementary school, right? All that, different parts of the country. And one of the things that bothers me in terms of my lens, what I've seen, is that my critique of our education system, if I can call it that, in our country is we often don't teach young people how to actually think.
I know.
We don't teach young people how to be critical thinkers. We teach them to be essentially automatons.
Yes.
We teach them to get along. We teach them to work for somebody else, right? We teach them this antiquated bullshit formula that
Yeah.
says, Cathy, go to high school, go to college, get married, or get a good job. Nobody even tells you what a good job is. We make the assumption that it makes a lot of money, but it doesn't say. But because I know people, I'm sure there are others who are listening. You may know some people make a lot of money, but they hate that shit, right? We don't teach young people how to think for themselves. We don't teach people in general, in our education system, collective. We don't teach them to be critical thinkers. We teach them how to be followers. We teach them to work for somebody else, right? Think about some of the people in the world who've had tremendous impact on global civilization. Many of them didn't even go to college.
Do you know that the school system in this country, especially the school system, was created around the time of World War II to actually become factory workers?
Mm.
That was what the system actually was for.
Well, think about it. On one level, certainly it makes sense because you want to create a cadre of prospective workers,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
want them to
You want them?
obey,
Yes, exactly.
right? You don't want them to think. Right?
Right.
We what early in the interview when we talk about that song by George Clinton, think it ain't illegal yet. We don't teach kids. That's my biggest critique of from my own experience.
Yeah.
Education, our system in America, our education system in America. We
Yeah.
teach them to be followers and not independent thinkers.
Yeah.
And then we don't teach them how to dig for information.
Right.
And especially now with this media saturated society, we don't teach young people how do you dig for your information. Well, Professor B, I saw it on TikTok, and Cathy, she's got 500,000 followers, so it must be true, right? How terrifying! We teach people to value how many likes and shares somebody got,
Well,
and
also,
not. Well, is the story really true?
how about how about teaching people how to have a good self-image? How
That's a
about
whole.
that? I mean,
Yeah.
then there'd be no kids shooting each other and, doing, you know, getting into drugs for the wrong reasons and, because you would actually have a way to think, right?
Well, you
And
said that's part of what I alluded to. the idea of teaching young people how to be independent thinkers
Right.
instead of teaching them how to be followers. And I
Right.
remember when I was a kid, my mother used to tell us all the time.
Don't.
She used to say, baby, sometimes when everybody is going right, you might have to go left. If
Yeah.
in your heart you believe turning left is the best option and the right thing to do, you may have to, meaning sometimes you may have to make a decision that's not popular with the group.
Yep.
And nothing among all the lessons she taught me, that was one that resonated throughout my life. So I grew up never, not being afraid to say, no, I ain't feeling that. And I don't care if everybody else is doing it. I ain't doing it. And I don't care if y'all tease me. Please get out of here. Right. So I think that when you, to the point that you're saying, we don't teach, it's unfortunate. I
It is.
think in general, we don't teach young people how to be independent diggers, or what John Henry Clark called critical consumers of information, right? Just give me the headline, Cathy. Don't make me read that whole article. I'm just interested. It's true because I heard it. It's true because it was on Facebook. It's true because it was on Fox. It's true because it was on CNN. It was on CBS. Don't make me think, please. Right? And that's the part of America that I don't quite the consternation.
Yeah. Charlotte Pope says, I heard if they jump off the roof, are you going to do it too? I heard something like that
Exactly.
too.
Exactly. And for my generation, I'm sure we all heard that. Yeah, that's one of those. I wish I would have patented that phrase.
Really? Hey, on a whole other subject, Kino wants to know, why did you never learn to play an instrument?
Wow, and I love that question too. And I know Kino. I have dabbled all my life with instruments, and I told myself, this is interesting. I told myself, having come back to Los Angeles and being surrounded by all these musicians, um, I must find a way. My problem in part is I like all of them. I've dabbled with a trumpet. I've dabbled with a piano, and even right now, dabbling with a guitar. My problem in part is having the discipline to say, look, I'm going to focus on this one particular instrument, learn that, and then branch out. Right? That's what my problem is, having the discipline to say, look, if you're serious, and at this point, I think part of it, I haven't been serious about saying, I'm going to commit to learning an instrument. Right? I've been okay with, and being fed metaphorically by being around musicians, right? I've even had musicians on more than one occasion, right? Piano players or guitar players, drummers, and just sit down with them, and especially my piano friends. There have been times, this happened a couple of weeks ago here on campus. This guy that I know, he was playing the piano, and I sat down and I was just doing it, and I've never had any lessons. And I told him, he said, man, you have a hell of an ear. Right? Because I don't know, I'm not trained there, but I like the keys, I can do that kind of stuff. He said, you have a hell of an ear. If you learn the piano, it has the ability to enhance your ability to pick up learning other instruments. I don't, as a musician, I don't know that. I'm not a musician. But going back to Keno's question, I told myself by hook or crook, I don't know what it is. But the hard part for me is sitting down saying, I'm going to learn whatever instrument it is. That's been my problem. And at some point, it's not a priority at this point because I've got other things, but at some point, it's my hope that I'll prioritize something,
Yeah.
because music is so beautiful aesthetically, but most important, what it does, what music does to my soul, right? How music touches this. Ironically, this is part of my lecture yesterday, and it was in the context of the importance of music. Think about it. How you can go to a concert, and I think I used Snoop Dogg, and I forget what other musician I used. And I was talking about, you can go to certain concerts, and you can see people from all types of demographics. in these concerts. And, they high-fiving. They don't even know each other now. I'm talking about the people in the audience. They high-fiving. Oh, man, did you feel that groove? Oh, yeah, everybody's cool. And when the concert is over, once they walk through those doors, they go back into their silos. They go back into their safe spaces, their religion, their language, their gender, their ethnicity, and they ain't really trying to hear anybody else's perspective. But that music was the medium to bring them all together.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I mean by the power of music. It's like what's the old saying that Sunday mornings are the most segregated times in America in churches, right? It's that part. People go into churches and everybody's loving each other, but when people walk out the doors, something happens, right? But Keno, hopefully at some point, man, I will make a priority. It's not on my table right now. And that my problem is that I have not made an instrument a priority. And perhaps I think I've probably been too comfortable being around musicians. That has fed me. And then
you get
teaching music, and then, producing and hosting my radio program. So I think I've got.
It's a lot of creativity. And I mean, that's like when I'm not writing music for a period of time, I realize it's because I don't feel a need. I feel like I'm being fed all the creative energy by
Yeah,
whatever I'm doing,
yeah, yeah. Wow.
I wanted to share with you that when I was in college, I was into the Grateful Dead.
Okay.
That was one of the groups.
Uh-huh.
And I had a little community of, people I lived with and stuff. We went to a Grateful Dead concert, and I was so, like you were talking about the young people being inspired and stuff. I was so out of my head, man. I was so like overjoyed, and I was talking, and the Grateful Dead were there, and they were, just being their incredible self.
Mhm.
Some guy in front of me like lost it because I was so overflowing. He stood up and he said, shut up, and he sat down, or my friend who was a big guy put his hand on his shoulder and he said, sit down. And I could feel the energy. It was like this.
Mhm.
I just touched the guy on the shoulder and I said, I'm sorry. And then everything just
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
that whole experience. Well, and the Grateful Dead too. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
you know, those moments just change your DNA, your thinking and stuff.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just it clicks in something, and then that's part of your whole future line.
Yeah. One of my earliest concerts growing up, and I'm so glad it happened, was a Parliament concert
Oh,
in St. Louis. That was one of my, if not the first, but certainly one of the first concerts. And I will never, ever forget that. And what really resonates is the sense of community.
yep.
And at that concert, I was probably, because my mother had driven us. It was me and my sister.
Uh-huh.
And my sister was 2 or 3 years older than me. So she's kind of like, chaperoning almost. I think I was probably 14, 15 or so.
Yeah.
And I remember really being amazed at seeing all these different types of people at this Parliament concert, right? Because I was familiar. I'd already, by that time, I had already known essentially their complete discography.
Uh-huh.
So Parliament, I was that fun, and still I call myself today a funkadelic relic, right? Parliament, funkadelic, those are two of my main groups. In fact, Parliament is probably my all-time favorite. Parliament is my all-time favorite group musically.
Uh,
Yeah, but just being amazed that you were talking about your the experience with the Grateful Dead. That's how my experience was at that Parliament. I was just blown away seeing people of all ages. I'm like, all these old, I was like, and when you're 14, 15 years old, people in their 30s and 40s, to you, that's old. Right?
old.
Like, what are all these old people doing?
Yeah.
But that again, that's the beauty of music. It goes exactly what you and I have been talking about.
Yeah.
The power of music to bring people together,
Yeah.
you know.
What year were you born?
1963.
Okay, wow. The way you talk, you seem my age, but you're 10 years younger.
Oh, I didn't I just I never would have imagined. I actually thought we were closer to the same age. I
Yeah.
mean, 10 years, I thought you were around like 60 or something like that too.
Yeah, like I
Yeah,
know 'cause we have a lot of similar perspectives and
yeah,
especially about that time period.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um yeah, Donna had another question which I like. Is there any type of music, I mean, what you just said it, but other than jazz, you're surprised you enjoyed, and what music is that?
Um, Now the answer actually is no. There's no I listen to everything.
Yeah.
Now, what is so it's not surprising to me. What is surprising to others
Yeah.
is there's some Hank Williams tunes, right?
But
That are
Hank
straight
Williams was,
Hank Williams Jr. That
yeah,
is straight cold blood in a good way. Good.
very
So
sophisticated.
there's some country tunes that I dig, and some of my friends are like, "Yo, you listen to country? I listen to everything." He has a cut called "Long Gone," and it's when you listen to it, it's what the song kind of reminds me of. And there's like this kind of not quite a Leon Thomas. You hit Leon Thomas.
Yeah.
It's not quite Leon Thomas, but it's almost like this, like half lyric, half yodel, and it's only just over, I think, 2 minutes long. Hank Williams Jr. is called "Long Gone." He's like long, long gone by. So it's cold, and it just so for me, it's just so rhythmic. But answering the question, Donald, I listen to music across the board, so nothing surprised me. It's what surprises my associates or friends.
Yeah.
You're right. So there may be some heavy metal, right? Um, I mean, there's some things I don't, I can appreciate but don't necessarily get into. But my palate, you know, um, I grew up again, listen to everything. There's some like Rush
Yeah.
in terms of outside of jazz. It's one of my favorite groups. Uh, Journey. I used to listen to a lot of Journey. Jazz has always been in there. Of course, the funk got all of that. And then some European classical that I can did back then, and some of it I can still get into. Yeah, but my taste is across the board, and
Yeah.
sometimes people are surprised at kind of the range of stuff that I'll put on. Sometimes they be like, "What you know about that?"
Leonard Skinner. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, my husband is not a super jazz head. But he
uh,
has a huge record collection.
yeah,
But so it's other stuff. Not so much country, more classic rock, and
mhm.
there are some things that he puts on, and I'm like, I can't listen to that. I'll listen a minute, and then I'll go, I'm sorry if it doesn't have a groove, some kind
Right,
of a
right, right.
groove. I can't do it. But
Yeah, yeah.
it's
Now I'm
pretty.
trying to remember. You made me think. I'm trying to remember the name of the group. But it's one of my all-time favorite cuts on the tip of my tongue. The cut is Iron Man. Dun,
I'll
dun,
go.
dun, 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 dun. I am Iron Man. Um, oh, it's on the tip of my
Iron
tongue.
Man is, let's see, song. Iron Man song.
Iron Man.
Black
It's on
Sabbath.
the tip of my tongue. Huh?
Black Sabbath.
That's it. That's it. They got some cold cuts. Black Sabbath people, well, if people who don't know, listen to some of those In fact, listen to the song that Iron Man is on.
Yeah.
There's some cold cuts. There's so like you said this a long time ago in the interview. There's so much music out there.
Yeah.
There's so much music out there, right? And the beauty of in terms of my work is I wake up, listen to music, and I go to bed, listen to music.
Yeah.
And apparently, when I'm walking across campus, I'm bouncing according because music is always in my head. It's always in my head. It's such a wonderful outlet
Yeah.
that's good for my soul.
You're saying a lot of things that feel, and also I experienced. I remember somebody saying, I saw you the other day walking down the street, but you were like singing a song or something.
Right, right,
Yeah, that's what I do.
right, right. Now
Um,
you do obviously I know you're a vocalist. And what else do you play the flute as well?
Not really. Here it
You do,
is. But during the
okay.
pandemic, I took a few lessons. I
Ah,
I studied at Berkeley. I can play it, but for some reason, at the point where I could actually play flute,
hmm
I
hmm
decided I was going to be a singer.
Okay. Now do you play instruments
Well, I play some.
outside of the voice?
I play some piano, like enough to write and to
Okay.
play for my students and do an
Okay.
occasional, very minor type of gig, you know.
Right, right.
Yeah, so, but no, I've been making a lot of records over the years and, I'd say I'm jazz, but my influences because of that period of time that I'm talking about, my influences can kind of come out of Woodstock too,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
maybe even a little out of Judy Garland, and because I grew up in the '60s,
hmm
not jazz per se, but it was like,
Right. I got you.
yeah, it was kind of pop, but it was kind of jazz influenced, those singers who were Jack Jones, and it wasn't exactly jazz, it was something
Yeah.
else.
I
And
got you. I
so,
got you.
yeah, some of that, and definitely funk. I mean, Motown
hmm
really got into my soul, and,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so not so much classical. I don't have a lot of classical in my background.
hmm
I was trying to think of this guitar player who has an unusual name. I know everybody knows this guy. He's kind of blues. I always thought he was blues, but he's kind of jazz blues.
hmm
He's got an unusual name. He's very famous. Um,
He's a
and
contemporary or somebody from the past?
contemporary. And it's not like Keb Mo, who I love Keb Mo.
hmm
It's um I can never remember his name, but I'm always surprised by what I hear from him because it's quite jazz-like, but I
Yeah.
think thought of as a blues player more, like he travels the blues circuit.
Okay.
Right on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, I'll try and
Okay.
remember. But
Yeah.
Donna has another question. Are you a movie fan? If so, what's your favorite movie? And have you ever watched a movie and bought the soundtrack? Good
Wait,
question.
wait. I was laughing. I'm sorry. So what's your favorite movie? And what was the second part?
And have you ever watched a movie and bought the soundtrack? If so, what movie was that? And what was it about the music that hit your soul and heart? I just want to squeeze mine in.
Go
Cinema
ahead.
Paradiso.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Gorgeous
That's a go.
music.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me tackle one. Let me tackle the first part of the question, and this is actually, remember I said a few minutes ago about like sometimes music I'll play and my friends will be surprised,
Yeah.
and this is it's a movie.
Okay.
There's a song, and the song is cold. It's called Dueling, like it's in duel,
Yeah.
Dueling Banjos.
Okay. Yeah.
That song is from a movie called Deliverance.
Right.
See if you can, for the listeners out there, it's cold. And it's just, if you ever saw the movie Deliverance, there's a scene where one of the men who is on this hiking kind of expedition,
Yeah.
they're in this community, right? Kind of backwoods community. And
Uh-huh.
there's a kid playing a guitar. And the guy who's not, who's kind of a visitor, for lack of a better description, uh, he is mimicking what the kid is playing. So
Okay.
the kid, and he looks like he's like developmentally disabled or something like that, the
Yeah.
kid. And so the kid kind of gets a kick out that the guy mimics him. So now they go back and forth and they create this song together. Again, dueling. So I actually have the soundtrack to the movie Deliverance. The song is Cold. So Donna, that's the song. It's called Dueling Banjos. Do I have a favorite movie? My all-time favorite movie, which ironically Herbie Hancock did the soundtrack to.
Oh.
It was done in 1973. The movie's called The Spook Who Sat by the Door. In my opinion, one of the coldest, most significant movies for me in the history of film. The Spook Who Sat by the Door was done by Sam Greenlee.
Okay.
And it started out as a novel in 1970. And Sam Greenlee could not find a publisher in America to publish his book. He's from Chicago, a black man out of Chicago, and nobody would publish his book. He ended up meeting a white woman who was a publisher in, I think, London, who eventually published his book, which had multiple iterations, meaning there was a readership for it, right? Subsequently, the movie was made in 1973. Now, the storyline behind the movie, and we talked about the politics of the community earlier, this is the epitome of that whole experience. Now, fundamentally, the spoiler alert for anybody who's listening to may go say, I won't say too much, the spoiler alert, but I'll say enough to explain why the movie and the book had difficulty getting distributed. The movie always, in fact, I played in my class, and I always ask students, have y'all heard of Crips and Bloods? Oh, yeah, we've heard of Crips and Bloods. All right. What are some of the messages? What are some of the themes? What are some of the monikers, right? And, of course, the monikers will be negative, monikers about what they think about these organizations. And then I say, imagine then that instead of the Crips and Bloods being detrimental to the community, now they are allies. They're actually working together to protect low-income and Black communities, right? So instead of shooting and fighting each other, now they are there to protect, Black mothers and kids walking to school. They're making sure they get there safely. They're making sure that, Black children are not, that they're monitoring the police, so they're making sure that they're not randomly getting shot by police. The movie or the book, let's go back to the book. Thematically, the movie is about Black liberation and what happened if this cadre of young Black men in particular, and further, young Black men who are armed. That's another level. And we can talk about that when Ronald Reagan became governor. That's a whole different issue. So now these organizations, these gangs, if you will, self-sufficient, they're looking out for the community and protecting the community from people who are committing violence against the community. Nobody in America wanted to publish that book. When Sam Greenlee did the movie, he had to use guerrilla tactics to film the movie. So you know how with movies, you have to get permission. You're supposed to get permission from the city. Hey, we're going to be shooting, pictures of this, da. Sam Greenlee, there are instances, much of it was shot in Chicago and Gary, Indiana. Sam Greenlee he had difficulty getting permission. So he said, forget it. I'm going to use my little 8mm camera and I'm going to shoot the stuff, right? And he did. Nobody wanted to touch that movie, I argue, in part because America at that time was not ready for this idea of these young armed Black men who weren't looking for violence, but would protect us. So if the KKK rolled up on them, they were going to have some smoke for the KKK. But America, I think politically, was not ready for that message because they were afraid that this movie might incite young Black men to go out, right? Eventually, I think it was Universal picked up the movie. In theaters, that movie was out, I think, at tops, maybe 2, maybe 3 months before, for all intents and purposes, our government shut that movie down. Shut it down. Not because it was a bad movie, but thematically. Now, when that movie was shut down, it was a whole underground of people who made VHS, this is how long ago, VHS copies of the tape. So there was so it wasn't no, like now, YouTube and all that stuff. So it was like, you make a copy on the tape. Call you, hey, Cathy, guess what? I got a copy of The Spook Who Sat by the Door. Oh, whoa, I'll hook you up with a copy, right? You burn a copy. You call up Donna. Donna, guess what? I got a copy of Spook Who Sat by the Door. What? You hook her up. Donna called Keno, right?
Yeah.
And so it was this whole, the movie did not come out on DVD until about 2020.
Oh, wow.
Now, what does that? What does that have to do with society, Eddie, and the McCarthyism and all this kind of stuff? Well, I think in America, generally, America has not been ready for movies, either in which are, of course, fiction, but sometimes they replicate real life. I think America, when we look at America's history, one, America has not sufficiently dealt with slavery. We haven't had and I'm not talking about a trite apology. I mean a substantive, policy-based, movement-based action on dealing with it and the historical ramifications. That is to say, things that exist today and that are a direct result.
Yeah.
So the idea, one of the things during that enslavement period was to essentially, intellectually and physically castrate Black men who wanted to revolt.
Right.
So when we look at movies and television throughout those years, since the invention of the television, we typically have not seen characters where Black men have been thinking Black men, right? So it makes sense why that movie, The Spook Who Sat by the Door, the book and the movie, was muted.
Yeah.
So we don't hear stories about resistance movements. We get fed ad nauseum things like, Roots, that, that TV show is real popular, but we don't hear, because we in Roots, we don't see real resistance. It almost supports the notion that Africans were, well, we cool with being slaves. No, we weren't. There were thousands of revolts,
Right.
resistance movements, right?
Right.
So when we don't hear stories like, and it's mind-boggling, but I understand.
Yeah.
There's an organization called the Deacons, like church deacon, the Deacons of Defense. They
Okay.
started, I think, in 56 or 1957. Don't quote me on the year, in Louisiana,
Uh-huh.
and they had chapters in Louisiana and Missouri. For the listeners out there, look up the Deacons of Defense. Their story we never hear.
Uh-huh.
These are a group of Black men who say, you know what, we're going to abide by the laws, but we're going to protect our community. So remember the time period. And Louisiana, people forget, they think New Orleans, but don't forget Louisiana is the deep South. The Deacons of Defense said that we are going to protect Black communities. We're not going out and, start anything. So the Deacons of Defense would literally walk young kids to parks when people in the community were trying to integrate parks, public spaces. And the Deacons of the Defense were armed. So when the KK rolled up, they said, wait a second, we're not going to try to intimidate these kids. Y'all go ahead and integrate the park. Those are the stories we never hear.
Yeah.
Right. So Donna, that's a very long way. That's why the social, the cultural, the spiritual implications of the movie. That's why it's my all-time favorite. And again, as I mentioned, Herbie Hancock did the soundtrack to it. So it's a good soundtrack.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you love Thomas Sewell?
Do I love him? No, I don't love him. And I always tell people, when you ask a question, never asking a close-ended question, because that with a close-ended question, you have essentially two options: a yes or a no. When you ask an open-ended
How about
question,
like what do you think of Thomas Sewell?
there you go. Now we're talking, right? As my grandmother said, now you're cooking with gas. Now, so to the first part, no, I don't love him. And that's not hating on him. It's just because, but the question was, do I love him? What do I think about his work? I think that he is certainly an intelligent person.
Yeah.
I think he is a learned person. My critique of his work is, I think he's ahistorical, right? I think that his criticisms of the Black community in part are Black people need to have a certain level of personal responsibility, right? It's up to Black people to solve their problem. I get that. I agree with that part. I think with Soul, he neglects, I think, to look at historical institutional forces that have thwarted Black people from getting ahead. So, for example, we can look at the 1954 Supreme Court decision, right? Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas.
Okay.
So that was the Supreme Court decision that decided that segregation in public schools was unconstitutional,
Uh-huh.
right? So prior to then, Black people just couldn't go to any public school as collectively,
Right.
right? What's so I think so institutionally redlining, and we saw this even in St. Louis. There's a community called Spanish Lake. So Black people who were working in the automobile industry in the 70s and the 80s, who wanted to be upwardly mobile, and they wanted to move out to the suburbs, in this case, a place called Spanish Lake, they were not allowed to move there institutionally, which is what I think sometimes Soul forgets. Why? Because banks and real estate agents were colluding to keep Black people out,
Yeah.
redlining.
Yeah.
So even Black people who had enough money to buy these houses, they couldn't get a bank loan, even though they had history working with these factories,
Yeah.
right? So it's those institutional barriers. Let's not say, of course, we got Oprah Winfrey, we got Bob Johnson, we got people who make big money. Those are exceptions to the rule. The masses of us don't have that kind of capital. So I'm saying with Soul, I think he sometimes neglects to discuss or acknowledge, yeah, I think Black people like anybody else. But how can you pull yourself up by your bootstraps if your boots have been taken or your shoestrings have been taken? We can go back to 1921, so-called Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's a community that say, you know what, cool. Y'all we'll deal with y'all segregation. We are going to develop our own banks, healthcare, schools. This is a thriving Black community, segregated, all Black people, Black. That city was literally burned to the ground. What, 39, 40 blocks of Black people's homes burned to the ground by these mobs, lynch mobs of white people. Purportedly, it all started because of an interracial relationship, a Black man and a white woman. In the newspaper, y'all can, so the people out there, look this up. Don't believe what I tell you. Study, reach, dig on. It all revolved around this purported relationship between a Black man and a white woman, supposedly, who were kissing on an elevator.
Uh-huh.
And so the next day, a newspaper put out a story saying that this Black man should be nabbed. Somebody saw them kissing. And the white woman said, I don't want to prosecute. I know this cat. That wasn't enough. That was the level of hatred. So I think Soul forgets about those institutional barriers. That's not to say, like Maya Angelou said, I mean, we still thrive. We still navigate. We get that. But I think it's short-sighted of us to say the racism and segregation that happened a long time ago. Slavery, all this stuff happened a long time ago. Yeah, in the case of slavery, yeah, it happened a long time ago. But you have to remember that 400 plus years that institutions were built. So that even after Emancipation Proclamation in 1873, that laws were put in place to still limit the mobility of Black people being able to move, where it was against the law for 4 or 5 Black people to congregate in a public space. You could get arrested, presumably, for inciting a riot. There were what we call the jelly bean tests, where if you wanted to go vote, you had to guess. I don't have a plan, but you had to guess how many jelly beans were in a jar. Those are the things that I think Soul is misguided about. That he doesn't look at the institutional forces that were designed.
Well, it's interesting your reply because I tend to agree, but it's interesting because he's what he does talk about is how generalization, to me, that's
Yeah.
part of it. Generalization is not good, but in a way, he's generalizing, right?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Taylor asked, when you read any book or text in general, what is your process for dissecting information?
Hmm. I do a couple things before I even start a book. And I love books. One of the first things I do, and it's just my process. I didn't know I was gonna pull this off. I look at who published the book. Right. Obviously, I see who the author is. And then I look who published. And the reason I do that is I like to contextualize things. Because I think to me, life in the world is about context. So when I pull this book off the shelf, I see who published the book. That helps me. And it's not that you make it helps me to make some generalizations. It helps me to gather data, for lack of a better description, about where this book may be going. So my process, find out, because remember, we live in a capitalist society. Find out where the money goes, the money trail, right? So my process is, once I find out who the author is, I look at who the publisher is. Because oftentimes the publisher will help me get a sense, okay, get an idea to prepare for the type of ride that I'm about to embark upon. But that's my process. It's very simple. My mind is my palette in terms of what I read is wide open. I don't read everything on my bookshelf. A fair amount of, not all of it, but there's a fair amount on my bookshelf and at home where it's completely antithetical to my own beliefs.
Really?
In other words, I'm not afraid to read things that conflict with my own values.
Yeah.
Right? Because that helps me in part to hone up my own perspective. If I'm reading everything that supports what I believe, how much am I really learning?
Yeah.
Right? So I purposely and consciously read authors and works, and sometimes like Soul, like Shelby Steele, right? Like Walter Whit. These are some authors where y'all don't get it. But I don't toss them out because I disagree with them.
Yeah.
You follow?
Yeah. Well, you're making me think of, I remember I think when Trump was up for election, there was these two guys uh, that I guess they was, on social media. Um,
Mm-hmm.
these two men who had opposite points of view, who
Mm-hmm.
met every day for breakfast and
Oh wow.
talked about
Yeah.
their different perspectives. They were
Mm-hmm.
very friendly, and they did that every day, and it was so cool. It's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
let's just talk. Let's,
Yeah.
you know, um, yeah, you don't
And I
have to
think we
insult or
in our
anything.
country, in our country, too often we talk at each other
Yeah,
instead of to each other,
right.
right? And that's you see it play out on social media sometimes,
Yeah,
where people like get in these really really heated discussions. I'll be like, dang, and they're just like my perspective right, and oftentimes never really ask those salient questions,
yeah,
right? Really never tease out those questions because I think there's a lot to be gained from having dialogue that that may be different from our perspective.
yeah,
I think that's how you grow. That's how you learn.
yeah,
Right? It's like one of my favorite books is a book by Aldous Huxley called Brave New World.
yeah,
Love that book. Excellent book. Right? So if we are all beta minuses or alpha pluses, right? Those are the characters. If we groups of people, if we are, that means we're all thinking the same. We dress the same. We eat the same food. We take soma at the same. How do we really grow?
yeah.
You know, was there another part of Taylor's question, or was it
No,
about the
that
process?
was it.
Okay,
I want to get back a little to music for a minute.
yeah, sure, go ahead.
You mentioned that all blues was one of your favorite,
Oh yeah,
just all time cuts. What are another few of your favorite classic jazz?
ah, like that's like that my go to.
Yeah,
All Blues is one. That's Miles Davis.
Yeah.
Um, when I want that spiritual, when I need that little extra spiritual boost, almost anything by Leon Thomas and Pharoah Sanders.
Uh,
Not let me rephrase that. Not almost anything, but anything. Pharoah Sanders, and the same thing. The White Tribble.
yep.
They speak to my soul like nothing else. And anything by Leon Thomas, The White Tribble, Pharoah Sanders, Song for My Father by Horace Silver. That's one of my all-time favorites. Bumping on Sunset by Wes Montgomery. Chameleon by Herbie Hancock, but also a cut that I don't know why it doesn't get more discussion than I think it merits. It's a cut by Herbie Hancock, and the album is called Thrust, and the tune is Butterfly. Oh,
Yeah, that's a
oh,
song.
that cut is just beautiful.
Yeah.
Maiden Voyage, that's a beautiful one. Cheesecake, Go, that's the album by Dexter Gordon. I mean, that list can go. It's a whole bunch of albums or songs.
Right.
I mean that I can have several Zoom calls on my favorite songs alone, right? But yeah, my palette is broad though. Fine and Mellow. I love Billie Holiday's arrangement of that. Oh, when she sings that, Shirley Horn, anything by her. And what I love about Shirley Horn, and it's an illusion on my part. But what I love about when she's singing, it feels like she's singing. It feels like she's sitting right across from me and she's singing directly to me. Meaning she is something about when she does her lyric, she just personalized. And I love that about her style, right? I had the honor, I feel the same way about Abby Lincoln before she passed away. And I had the honor of interviewing her before.
Yeah.
And half hour before the interview, I'm like, my stomach is like in knots because it sunk in. This is really going to happen. I'm going to interview an icon, right? And I've had that with all type, like Randy Weston, McCoy Tyner, Charlie Hayden, but that experience was just different, and she has that same effect when I listen to her music. It's just she's singing, but it just sounds so conversational and personal. Betty Carter, same thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Mark Murphy too.
Yeah, absolutely.
He has that
Absolutely.
really personal, like he's talking to you.
Yeah. I played some of his music. I can't remember what arrangement I did. So on my radio program, I'm every Monday on KXLU.com. That's www.kxlu.com. www.kxlu.com. So my program is every Monday from 6 p.m. until 7 p.m. And for those folks, and I get listeners, I got this cool group of folks all the way in Auckland, New Zealand. So
I'm sorry. Before you go on, hold your thought. Every
Mhm.
Monday at 6 o'clock, right?
Right, 6 p.m. until 7 p.m.
And it's what are the call letters again?
KXLU.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And sometimes I'll actually on that note, this coming Monday, I have a very, very special guest. She has been on my show before. Every time she comes, we have a ball between her anecdotes and her personal testimony. And I'm teasing, setting this up.
I know.
But every time she comes, she's coming to pass. She usually brings away music to give away. So folks out there, make sure y'all tune in because she's probably going to bring some music to give away. Her name is Laurie Pepper. Laurie Pepper is the widow of the late, great saxophonist, Art Pepper.
Oh, I remember her.
Right? Yeah, I know you do.
Yeah.
For the folks out there who may not be here, so she's going to come in and what's going to be this interview, but largely she's coming in to talk about some material that hasn't been released yet. And there's a record label, Omnivore Records, 7, not 1, not 2, not 3, but 7 discs of Art's music that hasn't been released before.
I love
I
the
can't, I can't, I can't wait. I
yeah.
can't wait. So we're going to talk about, so she's going to be my guest on Monday. The following Monday, we probably, I don't know if I have any guests the following, but we'll get, it's always music. But
Yeah.
sometimes I'll have some giants like that. So,
Yeah.
so for the folks who are listening now, make sure you tune in on Monday. One, we always just have fun. But chances are she's going to give away some music. But
Wow, that's
I
cool.
can't wait. I dig Art Pepper is one of my favorites.
Me too.
And so on my end, I'm like 7 CDs of music that I haven't heard before. Now, some of them, of course, is going to be releases or releases of other tunes, but these particular releases, some, as I understand it, have not been put out yet. So I'm wired up.
I can't wait. When I was about 20, I don't know, in my early 20s, Art was playing in town, and
Uh-huh,
I guess Laurie was there too. And so I remember especially him playing at Pasquale's, which was right on the water at
uh-huh.
Malibu. Pat Senator owned that place.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, Art Pepper, man. I think him and Sonny Rollins might be my favorites from that
Mhm.
period.
So let me flip the question. Who are some of the folks that jazz wise that make your heart smile?
It's been and changed over the years. The first group that I ever chose myself, not my dad's, listening.
Right.
It must have been my birthday or something. My sister took me to see the Modern Jazz Quartet in Boston at
Ah,
Paul's Mall,
mhm.
or the Jazz Workshop, actually. It was
Right,
small
right.
room. Sometimes I think, I wonder, they probably looked at us like, who are these two little white girls, sitting in the front row, like listening. But they were dressed elegantly and they respected each other and the music. And that was part of it for me. The music itself, like listening to George Shearing like that too.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
was
yeah.
a quality, a
Mm,
sophisticated quality of jazz that I was drawn to.
mhm.
And, but Miles probably was maybe the biggest influence in me,
Okay.
especially when I was at Berkeley. Um,
Mhm.
when I heard um, Weather Report and Bob
Yeah.
Moses and
Oh,
groups
yeah.
like that also totally appealed to a certain part of me that was open, because of how they play, right? Like there's a
Mhm.
center and then everybody's doing what they want, but they're all connected to the center. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
talk about a metaphor, right?
Absolutely,
do
absolutely.
do what you're good at, but connect. And
Mhm.
the singers that I mean, I did appreciate people like Judy Garland and Rosemary Clooney, but probably more so in their highlight days was Ella and Sarah, Billy
Mhm.
and Carmen. Actually, I preferred Carmen later on. Then I was just totally blown away by Carmen. It was like,
Oh, yeah.
oh my
Yeah.
God, she doesn't waste one word,
Not one.
And
Yep.
she's
Yep.
so she amongst all of those singers stayed contemporary. She stayed connected to contemporary music, like she would bring
Mhm.
in other songs, but she always operated from this truth and honesty, which
Mhm.
both Ella and Sarah, as they aged, they kind of got a little lazy about that,
Mm,
um,
mm.
in my opinion. And
Mhm, mhm.
um, let's see, the Heath brothers.
Oh, yeah.
One time I sang with them, I thought I was on a different planet. It was
Mhm.
the most unique, deep experience that changed
Yeah,
my
yeah.
heart. You know?
And
Uh,
it's interesting, you just, so much is just going through my head. Lee Morgan does that.
yeah.
He's one of my all-time favorites. In fact, um, I always manage, at least thus far, I've managed to play a Lee Morgan to every broadcast. Gotta have me some Lee. I love Lee's work. Um, the Heath Brothers. And when you said the Heath Brothers, that was another trigger for me because it made me think of Tootie. On one level, it also made me think of Ahmad Jamal, whom
Mm,
I had the distinct honor of interviewing, especially Ahmad Jamal before he passed away. He did not interview a lot of people.
mm.
or there are a lot of, and tell that story, that anecdote in the story in terms of how it all came about. But with Tootie and Ahmad, just the recall ability.
Mm.
Those cats, the memory was just impeccable, right? So there's like the first time I met Tootie, and then like several years had passed, and it's at some event, and you know meet this cat's how many thousands of people they run into, and this guy's like, "Hey Eddie, how you doing?" I'm like, "You remember me?" Similarly, Ahmad Jamal. Now, this is when I moved back to I was in St. Louis from 2014 until this past August. Ahmad Jamal, I think it was 2000, maybe 17 or 18. I don't remember what year, but let me go back. I interviewed him on my radio program
Yeah.
in 2000, I think it was 4.
Yeah.
2004, maybe 2006. Let's keep the year in mind. And I contacted a friend because Ahmad had released this new CD. I said, by hook or crook, y'all better find a way to get Ahmad Jamal on my program. And dude was like, well, Ahmad, he doesn't really do interviews. I said, y'all better find a way. And as the creator would have it, his publicist reached out to me. I'll never forget this. His publicist reached out to me. He said, Mr. Jamal has listened to your program, and he's agreed to be interviewed. All right, y'all better stop playing these practical jokes. This shit ain't funny, right? Right? I couldn't believe it. So the short story of it was really his publicist, and it happened. I'm interviewing him. And wait, let me go back. And he said, one of the reasons that Mr. Jamal has not done many interviews over the years is that he wants to focus on his music, and people will get off into, why did you convert to Islam? You know, why did you change religion? And he said, he just shut them all down. And I distinctly remember telling his publisher, I said, man, I don't care. This dude is an icon. This dude has made people happy around the world. I'm interested in his music and him promoting his new CD. I don't give a hoot. And he said, fine. You know, just as long as we don't go there. I said, I'm interviewing Ahmad. We're having a great time on the air. I swear you can't make this up. And then, you know, so now on the airways, we took a break. So I'm playing his music, and it's just he and I one-on-one talking. This dude says to me, he said, Eddie, I'm having a ball, man. Thank you so much. I am having a ball. And so, as you know, the real interview, when you interview folks, the real interview often happens off air. Now, that's 2004 or 2006. Fast forward, I was in LA. Fast forward to 2016 or 17, whatever it was, when he was performing in St. Louis. And I found out about it. I reached out to his publicist. I said, yeah, you know, oh, yeah, I remember you. I said, is there a way that you can get me backstage? Please don't tell him I'm there. Dude said, no problem. I swear to you can't. I got so many anecdotes that I'm pinning to get these down to trance so to share with these so they won't just be in my head, share with the world. So y'all can learn these beautiful notes and lessons. So go back to the green room. And he's in this big leather chair that is facing, the back of it is kind of facing the door. So he couldn't see me walk in. Now there's a long line, by the way. His publicist sees me, closes the door, long line, waiting to see Mr. Jamal. I walk, now his back is toward the door. I walk around. Eddie Becton, man, what are you doing? And say, remember, 2004, 2006, I hadn't seen over 10 years. Man, what are you doing here in St. Louis? I sat down, we talking. I don't know how much time it was, and we just having a ball. After a while, his publicist said, hey man, I know y'all having fun. We got a whole bunch of people out here, right? But it was just so wonderful, that experience. But my point, just his memory, just like Tootie, just impeccable.
Yeah.
Eddie, man. Can I tell you one more anecdote? And this is with Chucho Valdez.
Sure.
This is with Chucho Valdez. So I interviewed him years ago on my radio program.
Yeah.
And Chucho does not speak English.
Oh.
Right? So I had, there was a translator on the interview.
Yeah.
And so at the time, I think he was in New York. We did a phone interview. And it was in preparation for, he was going to perform some in the area, but I wasn't, he was performing, I think, New York and around the country.
Yeah.
He, going back to when I was in St. Louis, 2014, to recently, was performing in St. Louis. And the same, similar thing. So I see his publicist and we talked. I said, yeah. He's like, yeah, good to see you. Da, 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 da. And the translator comes out. Yeah, I remember talking to you. Da, 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 da. I go in. Let me go in. So one of the questions I asked him during the interview, if you come from a family of musicians, what would your life have been like had you not pursued music? And so he starts laughing, this big thunderous laugh. And the translator starts laughing. I said, what's going on? He says he would have been a professional boxer and he would have beat up Ali.
Oh, wow.
So that was on the radio now, yeah. Right? So fast forward probably at least a minimum of 5 years.
Yeah.
He's in St. Louis. I get back to the green room and he's shaking my hand. And so he didn't know physically who I was, what I looked like.
Yeah.
So I asked the translator, will you tell him this is the man who interviewed you and asked you, what would you be had you not pursued music?
Right.
Translator tells him is Chucho, and you know me, you sing, I'm sure. Chucho is really tall. I got this. I wish we had time for me to pull it up. Chucho is really big. He bursts out in this thunderous laugh, grabs me, and picks me up. And so he said, yes, he's telling to the translator, the three of us are going back and forth. Yes, I remember you. Glad to meet you. All this energy, it was insane in a good way. So all these anecdotes and these stories, and it goes back to what that question that Keno asked about an instrument. I'm at that point, like I haven't committed to an instrument, but what I have committed to is, at least I started the process of putting all these stories and experiences in a format that they can be shared.
Cool.
So that when I die and I turn into dust, that these anecdotes and stories about these giant musicians and people who impacted the world, again, Ahmad Jamal, Charlie Hayden, Horace, all these folks, so that their stories, and it ain't about me at all, it's about continuing the legacy. And it's just amazing how this whole interview is going full circle. The importance of our artists.
Yes. And
that's the part,
like you say, the humility. I mean, that's what I've discovered over these 500 interviews. Humility and purpose and ethical, kind of a why we're doing it, why we're here, why we're doing whatever we're doing. These are the people I like speaking to. And I have to say, I'd say about 95%, if not more, of the people were like that. Small percentage of the people were, I don't know what planet they were on, but it was not my favorite interviews, but lots of really great interviews like this one. I mean, this 2 hours is like nothing. We have to do it again. But I agree with you. Chick Corea comes to mind. He's one of my favorite people. And
absolutely. I interviewed him before too. Crazy.
Yeah, just a really great human. And anyway, of course, there's so many. There's so
Herbie Hancock.
Great humans. Yeah.
He's one of my favorites. This is in 1984. Jesse Jackson was running for president. Herbie Hancock's parents were, I don't know if they were living, but at least they were in Dayton, Ohio at that speech. It was on the campus of the University of Dayton, where I went to undergrad and graduate school. Jesse Jackson, you know how people say, so and so we got so and so in the audience, like celebrity. After the speech, everybody in the crowd, they hightail it to go talk to Jesse. I hightail it to go talk to Herbie Hancock's parents, right? And so I swear to God, this is true. I said, Mr. Hancock, he's tall. Mr. Hancock, I just want to introduce myself. I listened to your son's work, blah, 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 blah. And I swear to you, he says to me, why are you thanking me? I ain't do nothing. And I said, Mr. Hancock, with all due respect, if it weren't for you and Mrs. Hancock, we wouldn't have had Herbie. And he says, you know what, young man? That's all right. Right? Now, fast forward years later, I meet Herbie Hancock at the Playboy Mansion because of the Playboy, he's playing at the Playboy Jazz Festival. So press, we were invited, right? So at the Playboy Mansion, I see Herbie Hancock, walk up to him, hey, Mr. Hancock, blah, 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 blah. I said, back in 84, I met your father in Dayton, Ohio. And I told him this story. And Herbie, but he said, man, that does surprise me. He said, he said, yep, that's my father. Right? So all these stories, Cathy, are amazing. And, I thank you so much for inviting me and allowing me the space to learn from you, because that's what it's about, and share your passion, my passion. This is what we do. And I'm glad that the Creator has allowed our paths to cross. I don't take that for granted. I treasure what you do. And even the very idea that you've interviewed 500 some people is a testimony to, one, what people think about you. If you were not doing the good work, as they say, 499 people, the 500 one, maybe a parent or a relative, but all those folks would not have agreed to be on your show. I am honored and humbled that you allowed me the space to break bread with you, right? And like you said, I'm glad we've reconnected since I've come back. I've always dug your energy, and I appreciate you.
Thank you, Eddie. That's so sweet of you to say. And I'm honored that you were on the show. And just it's great to talk to you and to actually see how much in common we have.
Yeah,
And it's great. I want to stay involved with your world and definitely have you on again. I haven't been
absolutely.
doing that many live shows because I've been trying to concentrate on finishing projects and stuff. So
Right,
I've
I get it. I
lost
get it.
the archives. But this week I interviewed you and Ruth Price on Monday, which was
Oh,
great. So yeah, it's every now and then I have to have these special live shows.
right, right, right. I get it. I get it.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Cathy. Our paths
Okay.
will cross again.
Am I going to see you at one of those musical things this week?
Probably. I don't know which one, but well, now are you hitting up all of them?
Yes, and definitely the Benny Maupin one at the Red Cat on Sunday.
Right, right. Chances are I'm going to see you this weekend,
Okay.
if not more than once. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right, Eddie. Thank you so
All
much.
right. All
All
right.
right.
Thank you, Cathy. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye, everybody. See you
Thank
later.
you.